to Whodunit Hall. Allow me to reintroduce myself. I'm Edgeworth, the butler, your guide to the Master's extensive collection of mystery films. And today we are going to take a look at what may be the most famous fictional detective of all time. A master of observation and deduction with a strong sense of justice. I am, of course, speaking of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes made his debut in the novel A Study in Scarlet, which was published in Beaton's Christmas Annual in 1887. From there, he would go on to appear in 3 additional novels and 56 short stories. Additional authors have added their own spin on Holmes, including such as Laurie R. King, Anthony Horowitz, Lauren D. Esselman, and even Stephen King. Holmes has appeared in nearly every form of media: print, radio, film, games, and television. Holmes received a boost in the public eye in 2009 with the release of Sherlock Holmes, starring Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law, and getting further boosts in 2010 with the hit BBC television series Sherlock, and in 2012 with the series Elementary from CBS. Sherlock Holmes and the related stories passed into the public domain in the UK in 1980, and all Holmes stories published before 1923 are in the public domain in the United States, which leaves out approximately 10 stories from the casebook of Sherlock Holmes. As such, there have been many derivative works written and created with Holmes and Watson, setting them in different countries, times, and even other planets. One of the more memorable adaptations came in 1985, when director-producer Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment produced a film which posed the question, what would have happened if Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson met while they were still at school? And that question was answered in Young Sherlock Holmes. Directed by Barry Levinson and written by Chris Columbus, Young Sherlock Holmes presents, unsurprisingly, a younger Sherlock Holmes. A bit more emotional, but still just as brilliant. While Chris Columbus admitted being worried about offending Holmes purists with his screenplay, he wanted to show how Holmes became the creature of pure intellect portrayed in the Conan Doyle stories. The film did not do well at the box office, only making $19 million against an $18 million budget and garnering mixed reviews. It has, however, achieved a minor cult status. But how well does it function as a mystery? Does it hold up the traditions of the great detective, or does it fall somewhat short of the mark? Let us find out as we take a look at Young Sherlock Holmes. The film opens with a prosperous-looking gentleman stepping out for the evening, only to be followed by a mysterious cloaked figure. As the gentleman approaches a nearby restaurant, the figure raises a blowpipe and darts the gentleman as he studies the menu. This will lead to the worst meal this man has ever had.
Here we are, Mr. Bobster. Your favourite.
I haven't seen a bird that fresh since Mrs. Aubergine, the cook, was indecently assaulted by the master's pet falcon during mating season. Mr. Bobster, as the waiter mentioned, rushes from the restaurant back to his home, but there's no respite there, as even his own furniture and fixtures have turned against him. Convinced he's at risk of burning to death, Mr. Bobster crashes through his bedroom window and falls to his death, where we see the shadow of the cloaked figure and hear the peculiar jingling sound that will come to herald their arrival. Following the credits and a completely unnecessary disclaimer, we are treated to the arrival of a young John Watson as he arrives at his new boarding school, and he immediately meets his unusual bunkmate.
Stop! Isn't it valuable?
What's more important, its value or my sanity? I should have mastered the damn thing by now.
How long have you been playing?
3 days.
Well, perhaps you should be patient.
You're the new boy.
Yes, I transferred from another school. My name's...
Wait. Let me. Your name is James Watson. You're from the north of England. Your father is a doctor. You spend a considerable amount of leisure time writing, and you have a particular fondness for custard tarts. Am I correct?
My name isn't James, it's John.
Oh, James, John, what's the difference?
A great deal.
Oh, very well. So your name is John. How did I do on the others?
You are correct. On every count. How's it done? Is it some sort of magic trick?
No, no magic, Watson. Pure and simple deduction. The name tag on your mattress reads J. Watson. I selected the most common name that begins with J. James. Or John. That would have been my second choice.
Of course.
Your particular style of shoes are not made in the city. I've only encountered them once before during a brief visit to the north of England. The middle finger of your left hand is indented with a callus, a trademark of a writer. And you were carrying the Hunter's Encyclopedia of Disease, a handbook not available to the general public, only to practicing physicians. Since someone of your age obviously hasn't been to medical school, I concluded that it was given to you by an older person, someone very dear to you who was concerned for your health. Your father, the doctor.
And the custard tarts?
Simple. There's a distinct stain of yellow custard on your lapel. That particular colour of custard is used in the making of custard tarts, and, well, your shape convinced me that you've eaten many of them before.
There's no need to be rude.
Come on, we haven't got all day.
Well, hang on, where are we going?
You wouldn't want to miss chemistry class, would you?
By the way, what's your name?
Holmes. Sherlock Holmes.
As Holmes and Watson suffer through chemistry class, strangely enough for an all-boys school, a young girl knocks on the window and hands off a note to Holmes.
It's a girl.
Brilliant deduction, Watson.
But who is she, and what's she doing in a boys' school?
Her name's Elizabeth. Following the death of her parents a few years ago, she came to live on school grounds with her uncle, a retired Brompton schoolmaster.
Following this, Holmes meets with Elizabeth in the library, and we are introduced to Holmes's in-school nemesis, Dudley.
Would you like to see?
Very interesting.
All of the stylish gentlemen are wearing them.
Expensive?
I bought it in Bond Street.
I find that highly unlikely.
I beg your pardon?
Had you taken a moment to examine the face, you'd have discovered that it is noticeably French in style. And yet, according to this inscription, the exterior was manufactured in Switzerland. Yes, my suspicion was correct. The works are obviously Italian in origin. Congratulations, Dudley. Your stylish timepiece is a fraud.
Keep your opinions to yourself, Holmes. I look forward to resuming our conversation when there's a little more privacy.
You know, Dudley reminds me of the Master's eighth brother-in-law, always putting on airs and trying to make himself seem more important than he actually was. If I recall correctly, he was ultimately nibbled to death by a pack of rabid guinea pigs in Alberta, of all places. Completely silly death, but then he was an extremely silly man. Always wore striped shirts with plaid tweed jackets. Tasteless. As Holmes apologizes to Elizabeth for being late, Watson happens to hear a certain jingling sound coming from behind the bookcase he's looking through. He sees motion from behind the shelf, but slips off the ladder, causing the books to scatter and the unseen individual to leave. Now, the obligatory plot device, disguised as a character.
Elizabeth! Holmes! I think I've solved all of the problem!
Who's that?
My uncle.
Rupert T. Waxflatter, retired schoolmaster. Degrees in chemistry and biology, well-versed in philosophy, mathematics, and physics. Author of 27 books.
Incredible.
And most people think he's a lunatic.
Why?
After Waxflatter crashes into a tree, we see another gentleman surreptitiously sneaking around the grounds. Meanwhile, Waxflatter takes Holmes, Watson, and Elizabeth to his rooms with the remains of his machine. There we learn that Elizabeth is his niece and guardian, and they are interrupted by the man we saw earlier. Waxflatter sends the three out, but Holmes notices an article in the newspaper which has been circled, detailing Bobster's death. We then go to fencing class, where we meet two additional members of the staff, Professor Wraith and school nurse Mrs. Dribb.
Are you all right, Penshurst?
I think I sprained my ankle, sir.
Mrs. Dribb, will you attend to him, please? Gentlemen, we cannot permit ourselves lapses in concentration. We must work on technique, on rhythm, and on balance. I can can think of no better pupil to help me illustrate proper form and technique than Holmes.
Sadly, this scene illustrates one of the major problems with this film. It takes a considerably long time for our main characters to become embroiled in the plot, and as such, there's several scenes which are not much more than padding, and several subplots developed which ultimately go nowhere. As the boys have dinner, Elizabeth walks her dog, who notices the odd jingling sound in the cloaked figure. The dog gives chase, and the figure manages to escape over the wall before Elizabeth sees them. However, the dog does manage to get a scrap of cloth from the cloak. We then go to a nearby church where the cloaked figure dots the priest, who, like Bobster before him, has his own vivid hallucinations of being attacked. In this case, he believes he is being assaulted by a knight from one of the stained glass windows. Normally talk about behind-the-scenes trivia attached to the films that I review, mostly because I'm more concerned with the plot and how well the film functions as a mystery. However, there is a bit of Hollywood history attached to this scene which I feel I would be remiss if I did not bring up. The Stained Glass Knight is in fact the first computer-generated character to be fully integrated into a live-action film. And this effect was created by what was then a small division of Lucasfilm known as Pixar Animation Group. I thought you might find that interesting. Back to the plot. Obviously, the Reverend is scared off by his hallucination and dashes into the street where he is run down by a cab. And then the film comes to a screeching halt as we deal with a subplot wherein Dudley steals the school's fencing trophy and challenges Holmes to find it within an hour. Naturally, Holmes finds the trophy and the plot doesn't get moving again for more than 5 minutes when Waxflatter attempts to fly again, fails, and as they bring the remains back to his workshop, Holmes sees another obituary circled in the newspaper involving the Reverend's death. Surprisingly, Holmes does the sensible thing and reports his suspicions that all the deaths are connected to the police, specifically one Detective Sergeant Lestrade.
I don't have time for any more of your playpen crimes.
Just have a quick look at these.
A suicide? A carriage accident?
I suspect foul play.
Why? The two incidents are completely unrelated.
Wrong. Both men graduated from the same university in 1809.
Coincidence?
Neither of their deaths fit their personalities. According to his obituary, Bobster was a happy man, content with his life, his career, his family. Why would he commit suicide? He didn't even leave a note. And Reverend Nesbit is described by friends as warm, loving, peaceful. And yet the carriage driver insists that he was crazed, insane, in a state of panic when he ran out into the street.
Holmes, a mere fluctuation of character is hardly sufficient evidence to begin an investigation. And if you want my advice, you'll keep your nose out of the Times and into your school books.
However, things do not go well for Holmes when Dudley frames him for cheating during an exam. As a result, Holmes is expelled from the school, but before he can leave, Waxflatter becomes the latest victim of our cloaked murderer. The commotion catches Holmes and Watson's attention, and as Holmes sees what's going on, Watson bumps into the cloaked figure, who drops their blowpipe on the ground and vanishes into the crowd. Meanwhile, Holmes arrives in time to hear Waxflatter's last words.
Eta, Holmes. Eta.
Yes, Eta, the finest roofing shingle adhesive one could ever possibly want. Tile Grout the caretaker swears by it. and often swears at it when he's attached himself to the shed again. At Waxflatter's funeral, Holmes spots the mysterious man who is lurking on school grounds, and later breaks into Waxflatter's rooms and swears to solve the crime, planning on living in the room since he cannot be seen on school grounds. The next day, Holmes and Watson go out in search of answers.
Nice. Oh, very nice. Egyptian. The markings, the design, that's Egyptian craftsmanship. Well, I've only seen this particular type once before.
What?
On jewellery, on sculptures. I had it here in the shop. Ah, but I sold the lot
To whom?
an Egyptian. Oh, keep some sort of tavern.
Acquiring the address of the tavern owner who purchased the Egyptian artifacts from the pawnbroker, Holmes and Watson head for the tavern and get an unexpected reaction to the blowpipe.
Please. Are you the owner of this establishment? Have you ever seen this before?
Ramitep! 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 Ramitep!
Is that the end of the song?
Where did you get this from?
I happened upon it.
Go! Take it away! Get out of here!
Sir, it's very important. Could you tell us something about this?
يا ولاد قيرم بيرم داير ما يدور سنانه كرمة. Now, get out of my tavern, or these words will be the last words you will ever hear.
Sir. We're leaving.
Back at the school, Holmes investigates the other side of the shelf where Watson heard the jingling sound and finds several books on Egyptian history and culture, where they get an explanation for the tavern owner's reaction to the blowpipe.
Sorry, Watson. My God, that is remarkable.
Holmes, please. Oh, God. Oh, God. My chances of medical school. Great little office I've always dreamed of.
Watson, listen to this. The care to preserve bodies...
Holmes went on to explain that the Ramitep were a fanatical group of religious followers of Osiris, the Egyptian god of the dead. They were scorned by society because of their distortion of traditional religious beliefs and their violent and sadistic rituals. The Ramitep use a blowpipe and shoot a thorn into their chosen victim. The thorn is dipped into a solution made up of various plant and root extracts. When this solution enters the bloodstream, it causes the victim to experience very realistic, nightmare-like hallucinations.
Of course, we could have Holmes outright say all this, but apparently it was decided that it was much more interesting if we heard narration over his dialogue instead. Later, Elizabeth talks about her own encounter with the hooded figure, and the three search for the scrap of cloth the dog acquired from the figure. Holmes analyzes the cloth and determines it originated from a particular manufacturer. They find the building unlocked and an odd triangular crate inside. Which leads to alleged comedy.
What do you suppose it is? Some sort of Egyptian artwork? Some sort of statue?
No, Watson. I'm afraid this is only the tip of the iceberg.
Bypassing a door in the pyramid, Holmes finds a secondary entrance, and the three are treated to a horrific live mummification ritual being performed by what is apparently the London branch of the Ramitep. have some experience with this. Fanatical cults do not like it when their live human sacrifice rituals are interrupted. Things tend to get messy afterwards. Holmes, Watson, and Elizabeth race out of the pyramid, pursued by the Ramitep. As they make their escape, they are darted by members of the cult. Escaping into the cemetery, they become separated and each has their own hallucinations. Holmes is confronted by the disapproving appearance of his father, Elizabeth believes she is being buried alive by her uncle, and Watson is assaulted by suicidal pastry. No, I assure you, I am not kidding.
No. No.
Sherlock Holmes, everyone! Holmes is attacked by a member of the cult, but is rescued by the groundskeeper. The three are taken into custody by Lestrade, who of course once again refuses to listen to Holmes's theories. Back at Waxflatter's workshop, Watson finds a drawing of a group of men, which, as it turns out, is a picture that included Waxflatter, the Reverend, and Bobster. Unfortunately, they are discovered by Wraith. Holmes and Watson are told to go home, and Mrs. Dribb insists on taking the dog away from Elizabeth. Wraith states he intends to dispose of all of Waxflatter's belongings. The three are locked up, but they break out and begin to make plans.
Wake up.
This is Chester Cragwich.
The man who visited Uncle. Oh, the one you said ran from the funeral.
Exactly. But doesn't it strike you as odd that he's the only surviving member of this group? Now, Elizabeth, you go back to the laboratory and salvage as many of your uncle's formulas and inventions as you can. We'll meet you there. First, we've got to get ourselves out of here.
Holmes and Watson visit Chester Cragwich and finally get some answers as to why these men were killed.
We were to become business partners, all six of us. Borrow money from our fathers and build an hotel. It would be the most luxurious hotel ever conceived. And where better to build than Egypt? Labor and materials were inexpensive, and only a few years earlier, the British Army had driven out the French. It seemed a land of extreme opportunity.
What happened?
We engaged an architect and the work began. But what started out as a business venture soon became a major archaeological find. We discovered an underground pyramid, the ancient tombs of 5 Egyptian princesses. We removed all the relics and treasures, preparing to send them to England. But bloody insect. Place needs good cleaning. There was an uproar. All the villagers in the area were convinced we desecrated sacred ground. Our lives were in danger. The British sent the troops in. Several people were killed. The entire village was burned to the ground. Burned. Fire.
Cragwich has a hallucination, but Holmes manages to talk him out of it long enough to learn the identity of the mastermind behind the murders.
So very real. Yes, I mustn't forget. I must pass on this information. It is time someone else knew everything.
The Egyptian village, has it been burned to the ground?
Yes. Yes, yes. Luckily, we got out of Egypt with our lives. When we returned to England, we went our separate ways, all of us, however, keeping in frequent touch with Waxflatter through regular correspondence. When the murders began, I met quite frequently with my dear friend.
What does all of this have to do with the Rame tap?
Almost a year after the incident, each one of us received this letter. It was sent by a young boy of Anglo-Egyptian descent. You'll notice that the letterhead is adorned by the symbol of the Rame tap. 2 golden serpents. The boy who wrote the letter and his sister were staying in England with their grandfather when they learned of the destruction of the Egyptian village. the village which was their home. Both their parents were killed in the attack. The boy vowed when he grew to manhood that the Rame Tep would take their revenge and replace the bodies of the 5 Egyptian princesses.
And the boy was called Atar.
Atar! Those were Waxflatter's final words.
Very good, Watson.
Unfortunately, this triggers another hallucination, and Cragwitch attacks Holmes, but he's saved by an unexpected source.
Mr. Lestrade, what are you doing here?
Oh, I accidentally stuck myself on one of those damn thorns. God, the hallucinations, ghastly. Took 4 policemen to stop me hanging myself. Anyway, when it was over, I thought I'd better look into your story. Now, Holmes, I wish you and your podgy little friend farewell. I appreciate you getting me started on the case.
Getting him started on the case? Imagine that, Watson. I've only done all the work for him.
And as Holmes and Watson leave Cragwitch's home, the film abruptly decides to just outright reveal who the murderer is to the audience, not even giving Holmes the chance to solve the crime himself. Now, there is a scene later where he does put it all together, but it is terribly anticlimactic and doesn't explain Holmes's thought processes in the slightest. However, in keeping with the format of this program, I must end the review right here with a full 30 minutes left in the film, so as not to spoil the solution for you. This is not a very good mystery. The pacing is horrible, the plot basic, there's far too many unnecessary scenes and sequences designed to pad out the runtime rather than tell an engaging story. Any sense of mystery is tossed out the window the second the hideout of the Rametep are discovered, and the movie begins to look more like an adventure of Indiana Jones rather than that of Sherlock Holmes. One thing I can say in the film's favor is that the cast is excellent. Nicholas Rao and Alan Cox are a very credible young Holmes and Watson, while Sophie Ward and Nigel Stark bring the roles of Elizabeth and Waxflatter to plausible life. Sadly, their performances aren't enough to make this an engaging film. If you're a die-hard fan of Sherlock Holmes, or if you find yourself intrigued by what you've seen so far and want to see how the story plays out, then I would recommend waiting for the film to appear on television or come back into rotation on Netflix's streaming service. It was released on DVD and copies are fairly inexpensive, but quite honestly, it's not worth all the effort you'll go to track one down. And with that, I must bring this visit to a close. The Master has decreed that it's time for the annual donation to the museum's Egyptology wing. We're finally getting rid of that ridiculous mummy he keeps in the attic to scare the children at Halloween. In the meantime, I invite you to join me again for another visit to the Master's extensive collection here at Whodunit Hall. Eustace, once you get the mummy out of the attic, make sure you clean off the melted caramel and the streamers. Remember how badly the museum complained about the blood all over the guillotine we donated last year?